20% of them regularly forget to take their tablets. 5% omitted tablets if their blood sugar was too high, which is not what should happen. And only 2% of them omitted their tablets if their blood sugar was too low. So what are the goals for treating diabetes? And this depends on which of the various colleges or institutions that establish guidelines that you are following. So the ADA is the American Diabetic Association, the ACE, the ACE are the Association of Clinical Endocrinologists, whilst the IDF is the International Diabetic Federation. So let's focus on the IDF, because that's the one that's general to all of us. You find that you should try to keep your HbA1c as close to 6.5% and below as possible. And your blood sugar before food, try and keep it to lower than 110. These are very common questions that I asked in the clinic. So, doctor, what should my fasting be? So if you are diabetic, try and ensure that when you do your test in the morning, your values are below 110. And if you can keep it below 100, do so. The only thing is that for the elderly, we're a bit more careful because they have a tendency to blood sugars that are too low. And if you try to attempt to keep it too low, you might end up with hypoglycemia. And your values after food, you should try and keep to as close to 140 and below as possible. So these are the targets that you should attempt to achieve. So, but the American Diabetic Association generally tends to be a bit more liberal because it's a lot more common in their own environment. And their HbA1c, they want to keep to about 7% and below. They also want to keep their fasting values to between 70 and 130. So they allow values up to as high as 130. And your after food to less than 180. So they're a bit more liberal. But if you really want to ensure that you guard against the complications, then really you should be looking towards the values that the International Diabetic Federation has established. To note that insulin can be required, and the instances why all type 1 types of diabetics have to use insulin for control. The high-risk type of type 2s, if you're coming with very high values and you're sick in hospital, you almost certainly will require insulin. So any diabetic who's pregnant and not controlled with diet, even though this is being liberalized now, but it's normally recommended that you switch to insulin. If you're chronically or acutely ill, if you're getting ready for surgery, if you've suffered any of the complications, trauma, leg ulcers, and heart complications, then it's wise that you switch to insulin. And anybody who really wants to be strictly controlled, then insulin is what to use. And it's important that we stress the fact that even the type 2, which is the non-insulin dependent type of diabetes, is a progressive condition. And if you live long enough, a time is going to come when inevitably you would have to switch to insulin. So we doctors are advised not to use insulin as a threat. You come to my house, look, if you don't control your sugar well, I'm going to have to give you insulin. So they don't see it as, it shows that I have been naughty. Insulin, at some stage or the other, if you are alive with the diabetes long enough, there's no time very often that you would not end up requiring insulin for control. But the bedrock of treatment is, of course, metformin. And that is always the first drug that most individuals, particularly with the type two types of diabetes start off with. And every other thing is added onto it. So you can use metformin with insulin, you can use metformin with your sulfonylureas, with your the new drugs that everybody is now talking about, your post transporters, inhibitors. And you should consider the use of insulin in even your newly diagnosed type 2 diabetics. More so is the blood sugar at the time of presentation is very high, or the HbA1c is also very high. These are doses of insulin which I won't bother to go into. So what should we be doing to ensure that this epidemic doesn't become a problem? We should all make sure we are not part of the statistics of either those who develop it or those who develop the complications. So you should watch what you eat and drink. You should use your feet for what God created them for, which is walking. So all this sitting at the desk, sitting in front of television, all of it, we need to walk. What I always recommend is that in every hour, get up and walk for 10 minutes, whatever it is that you're doing. A lot of us sit at work. These days, you have standing desks that are being provided. I must say that I'm looking to get one myself. That this need for me to sit perpetually at work, one can do something about it. And most importantly, make sure that you get a regular checkup. Tell people that once you are 40, give that to yourself as a birthday present. Go to hospital. Ensure that someone checks you out, checks your blood pressure, checks your blood sugar, checks your cholesterol. Find out what your BMI is. Are you too big? Should you be losing weight? Make sure that you don't already have those complications that could become a problem. And the International Diabetic Federation is calling on all governments and policymakers to ensure that the cost of care and access to care is improved. We should be looking to prevent the development of the condition, because once it comes, it's like the horse has bolted out of the barn. So that we should do regular screenings to ensure that diagnosis is established early and consequently prevent those complications. And we should engage people who have diabetes in meaningful way to make sure that we get them to recognize that they don't have to suffer the discomfort and the complications if they handle it properly. So we should live right. If you drink excessively, you should quit. If you smoke, I really wonder why anybody should still be smoking. Then eat right. Don't quickly quaff all the food that comes to you. Eat slowly. If you eat slowly, you'll find that you won't eat as much. Avoid fast foods if you can. Don't skip breakfast if you can. That way you won't be so hungry that at lunchtime you end up eating double what you should eat. You should drink the right things. Avoid soft drinks. Drink water. Water is the best soft drink, and you should drink a lot of it. If you snack with fruits and nuts. I once had to give a talk at which a dietitian was there. And she said she was shocked when a family brought their 12-year-old daughter. The 12-year-old daughter was already 100 kilograms in weight at that time. And she was telling her that, look, you need to make sure that you stop and that, they should give her. She had never seen what a carrot was. She didn't know carrots. She didn't know about bananas. She didn't know about apples. So these are the things that we should give our children to snack with, and not cakes and biscuits and ice cream, as you'll see some. And then walk right, walk often, and then walk upright. I will always tell my patients, okay, stand up, chest out. It's good for your back as well. And then reinvent the home and workspace for easy exercise. Like I said, I'm looking to get a standing desk so that these days you find that everything is being digitized. Everything is now electronic. We all are on our phones and tablets all the time. So if you have to do it, don't sit, get up, walk around, and make sure that you walk those feet avoid a situation where this is a man eating a Big Mac and you can see the probably Coke in front of him. This is what happens in most homes now. Our children sit in front of the television. You can see the whole bottle of soda next to him and he's snacking on maybe some crisps or something like that. And this is not just there, it's everywhere. Even here in Africa, our children are becoming obese. You can see him, this is probably Kentucky or whatever, about 3 or 4 pieces of chicken and so much of chips in front of him. So be it Kentucky, be it burger, be it McDonald's, whatever. You see, our children are all becoming so obese, and he's pointing, saying that he wants more. So over the time, this is what has happened. This is how we were when we were young, and we go out and play. Now our children are cooped up at home. We're afraid they'll be kidnapped. We overly protect them, and progressively those children are becoming obese. We're becoming westernized. This is not unusual. You know, even here in Nigeria now, we're starting to see obese people. And what parents do is what the child will do. So if mommy has gone and is buying and eating ice cream, naturally the child would also buy and eat ice cream. That child is destined to become obese in the future. And if this is what mommy is doing, going to KFC, I assure you, this is what is inevitable. And we're not active enough. So what are the things we should do? We should reduce weight, and this should be encouraged. We should enact policies that limit the amount of calories. I think New York State in America has been at the forefront of this. They progressively are asking people to reduce the amount of salt in the food that they sell, and also the amount of sugar in the sodas that they sell. And I noticed that Coke in Nigeria too has also started to reduce the amount of sugar. And I hope that is from a government policy, because data suggests that Nigeria is the 4th largest consumer behind the US, China, and Mexico of all these carbonated drinks. It's estimated that over 38 million liters are sold yearly in Nigeria. And also alcohol. We find that over 208 billion naira is spent on alcohol. And I'm always amazed when I look at the statistics, because it's not just, yes, the South leads, I think followed by the Southeast and then the Southwest. But you'll be surprised that even the Northwest, aside from the North Central, also the amount of alcohol that is consumed in those places. These are things that don't help when it comes to prevention. So we should eat right, eat more fruits, vegetables. This is a family eating right. They're eating, I think this is a melon. We should eat more vegetables. I told you that that child had never seen a carrot in her life. Didn't know what a cucumber was. This is lettuce. So these are things that should prevail in our, and then we should walk. Walking is good prevention. And this is a group celebrating, I think, the World Diabetes Day several years ago. And the gentleman in the picture is actually the Oba of his town. And he actually joined the people in ensuring they took part in the walk. And then other forms of exercise, from chewing gum, you find that you don't exercise as much as if you walk at 2 miles per hour. Then if you bicycle slowly, it's not as much as walking at 4 miles per hour. If you do your gardening, that's even better. Then of course, climbing steps and every other thing in between. So in terms of monitoring, all patients should have their own glucometer kit. I insist that anybody who I manage with diabetes should go and buy blood sugar kit. And I think one of the HMOs with Roche has a program ongoing with the diabetic support group that could help with provision of such glucometers. So if you're interested, I think you should contact the coordinators of the diabetic support group And you can't manage your diabetes without having a glucometer of yourself. And not only should you have it, you should do the test. You should do it twice a day, fasting in the morning and 2 hours after your major meal. A urine test is not the best. You don't say you've done it. Some people say they test their urine. That's not enough. Then, like I said, you should do your HbA1c or your glycated hemoglobin at least every 3 months. You should also do your lipids, your cholesterol. And you should check the urine, not just for glucose, but for the presence of protein. And that's usually one of the earliest signs of damage to the kidneys as a consequence. Then, of course, go and see your ophthalmologist if you're diabetic. You should do that at least once every year. And at every time you visit, get your doctor to look at your feet and make sure you're not having any of the potential early signs of complication that might end up with the need for you to have your limb amputated. And then all of us should at least visit a dietitian. I think our own dietitians here we have one that comes, I think, on Monday and then Thursday. But always make sure that at least every 3 months, come and see your dietitian and just discuss with them what you eat and ask questions about what you shouldn't eat. And when should your local doctor refer you to a specialist if you find that your blood sugar is persistently raised and is not able to control it? Insist that you see somebody who is a little more experienced with handling such patients. If you find that there's ketones in your urine, that's not a good sign at all. If you're starting to leak protein in the urine, that's a stage at which you should get to see a specialist. If you have ulcers or gangrene, then please go to a place where you can be better managed. If there's evidence of eye changes, kidney changes, or you're having an infection in the blood, please see a specialist. Of course, if you have evidence of involvement of your heart, if you find that you're walking and you're having pain in your calf, which might mean that your blood vessels supplying blood to the leg is being affected. If you've had a stroke, you've had what we call a transient ischemic attack, which some call a mild stroke. If your heart is not beating properly, if your blood pressure is not well controlled, those are stages, if you're diabetic, that you must go and see a specialist. Then, of course, in pregnancy, if there's a need for surgery, if your sickness is very bad, then please see your doctor. So in summary, diabetes is a very serious condition. It's getting much more common. Prevention is possible if you do the right things. If you have it, it's important that we control it properly so that we can prevent the complications. Prevention requires a multifaceted approach. So the nurses are involved, the dietitian is involved, ophthalmologist, the dermatologist. So you might need several people to ensure that your control is good. And thank you very much. I know I've taken quite a bit of your time, but I hope it's been enlightening.
Thank you very much, sir. Wow.
Okay.
So like I said at the beginning of this session, I was very clear that this was going to be quite deep and very interesting. Dr. Bamgui, thank you very much. And even I would say for myself, I'd even learned a lot more. Knowing that some people are already diabetic without knowing is really a big deal. So at this point, if you have any questions, I would advise you use the hand symbol. You can raise up your hand, or you can also put it in the chat, and then we'll take it one after the other. So, sir, I don't know how we'll be willing to take this question. Do I just read it or have them ask one after the other, and then we'll take the answers? Or I just
not too many. I think we should start with each one, and hopefully once we answer one, there won't be the need to ask right. of the others, because I suspect that many of the questions would be similar.
Okay. So So we already have someone's hand up, and that's from, oh, okay, your hand is no longer up. Your hand is no longer up. So do we have any questions? You can put it in the chat section, and then I'll be able to like read it out to our hearing.
There are two hands up. There's Ibitomi.
Okay, yeah, Ibitomi and
TechnoSpark.
TechnoSpark. Okay, so Ibitomi, go ahead and unmute your microphone and then ask your question.
Okay, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good morning, doctor.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
How's Ilorin?
Ilorin is fine. Ilorin is fine. Thank God. Okay. Good morning, ma. For being doctor. I really appreciate it. My question goes like this. If I happen to be doing my fasting blood sugar every day, and I do the other one in at night, and I get good figures, do I have to still do the HbA1c test? That's the first one. Then the second question I want to ask is that I'm a post kidney transplant patient, and I've noticed that anytime I take apple cider, it lowers my blood sugar with medication. It lowers my blood sugar. So the first, maybe you answered the first question.
Okay, very quickly, so that we can go through all the questions. Okay. Do you need to do your glycated hemoglobin if you're consistently doing your HbA1? I mean, you're considering your fasting and your 2 hours after meal. The answer to that is yes. There are ways by which we are monitoring the blood sugar now.
Okay.
And I have one here. I'm sure I can show it on screen, which actually real-time monitors your blood sugar. What you do is you apply it on your arm, and it is continuously monitoring your blood sugar values and sending the values to your phone. Now, if you have that opportunity to do it, you'll find that even though you've been doing your fasting and your 2 hours after meal and you think it's been normal, you'll be shocked to find that you also have several spikes. And that's why it's still mandated that you should do your glycated hemoglobin. Because those two tests are just 2 points in time. There's a lot that can happen between those 2 times, which might actually be, surprisingly to you, very high. I think what is even more important to stress is that some people say, I've done my fasting and it's normal. That's what most people do. Many people do not even bother to do their 2 hours postprandial. And when I then insist that, no, all of you should do this, they'll suddenly come back and tell me, I'm shocked, doctor. My fasting has always been less than 100. But each time I do my 2 hours postprandial, it's over 200. And that is the fact. So not only must you do your fasting, you must also do your 2 hours postprandial or after meal. And I will always recommend that it is your 2 hours after your major meal of the day. If that is lunch for you, that's fine. In some people, it is their dinner. But also every 3 months, try and do your HbA1c. And that's the only way you can ensure that you reduce your risks if you are diabetic. As to apple cider, there are various forms of apple cider. And some of them might be sweetened, some might not be. What I would recommend is when next you see your dietitian, take the formulation that you take with you and let her or him look at it and advise you specifically as regards that.
Okay. Thank you. So, Mr. Ibitomi, has that been answered?
Yes.
So we'll move on to TechnoSpark 8B. Can you please unmute your microphone and feel free to ask your questions? Although I can already see we also have a question via the chat. But please.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you for today. My question is this. I feel most of our endocrinologists do not give us specific information on some products that could help us. Now, for the glucose monitor that doctor just spoke about, I've been aware of that for like 2 years, and I don't think there's anywhere I can get it here in Nigeria. With my research, I got a video I watched.
I'm sorry, please. Your microphone. Yes.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
we
you.
can hear
Good
you.
morning.
No, we can hear you up until you said something about the
Glucose
Well,
monitor.
I think you're talking about the glucose monitor that monitors sugar real time. Like I said, I have one here.
Okay, sir.
Holding it up. It's known as Freestyle. The unfortunate thing is that it's pretty expensive. You have to change it every 2 weeks. And quite a bit of money. But even in Nigeria, there are quite a number of people who have access to it and are using it. So if you are really keen on it, I'm sure if you ask the right people, you will find places where you can access it locally. But I find it quite useful to use it. And like I said, all it does is that once you've attached it to the arm, it actually monitors your blood sugar real time and sends the values to your phone. And what then is that if it's persistently too high, it actually sends you a message that you are aware that, look, I'm not doing the right thing. And you can also program it such that if your blood sugar is too low, it sends a message to your doctor or to anyone you identify as somebody who is close enough to you. Because like, one major problem is if your blood sugar is too low, you can actually fall off. It's a consequence of that. So sometimes you know that there's a patient who runs that risk. There are certain conditions that predispose you to that risk. Then this thing would be useful in such conditions. Where it's programmed to now send a message to a loved one or your doctor so that they can provide attention to you immediately that is observed.
Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Sometimes the patient runs that risk.
Okay, so we have some questions on that have been typed. And this one says, this from Toby. It says, please, I need answers to complications to using metformin. That's one. Then there's
answers to what?
It said, I need answers to using metformin. Sorry, I need answers. Is there complication for using metformin?
Complications from using metformin, that's glucophage. Yes, there are complications. And that's why there are certain conditions that contraindicate your use of glucophage. It enhances your risk of developing what in medicine we call lactic acidosis. And we know that there's some conditions that predispose to that. So of course, if you come in with ketoacidosis, we won't use it. If you have evidence of kidney failure, we will not use it. If you have evidence of liver condition, sometimes it's advised that you don't use it. So there are certain conditions which your doctor will tell you where it is best not to use glucophage. But other than that, it's one of the earliest anti-diabetic drugs. It's one of the cheapest. It is one of the most readily available, and it is one of the safest to use. So unless you have those conditions, which are not mainstream, they're not common in the ordinary diabetic, glucophage still remains the bedrock, on top of which several other drugs are now, latched onto. So it's safe to use it with your sulfonylurea. It's safe to use with your gliptins, with your, almost every other form of medication can be added onto your glucophage.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Okay, so more questions. This one is coming from Mrs. Leo, and she says, apologies if you've already answered this. Can type 2 be reversed? Can anything be done to improve insulin resistance?
Very good question. And I did make some reference to that in the course of the lecture. And I think the first thing to state is that many people who have diabetes have been pre-diabetic, some for as long as 10 years before they become overtly diabetic. And a lot of the time, what is happening with type 2 diabetes is that not that you don't have enough insulin. In fact, if you take the blood of somebody who has type 2 type of diabetes and you assess or you assay the amount of insulin in that person's blood, sometimes it's more than those who don't have diabetes. So what is happening is that that individual has developed resistance to insulin. And very often that resistance is because the person is too fat. I'm going to be very blunt. I'm not going to try and paper it over and say overweight or obese. If you're too fat, that's one of the major reasons that leads to insulin resistance. And that's why you find that in treatment of such individuals, one of the things we focus on is that weight loss. So going back to her question, can type 2 diabetes be reversed? Yes. If you're able to reverse that insulin resistance, very often, sometimes the diabetes disappears. So if you come in and your weight is 180 kilos, and you are able to reduce that to 100, I can assure you that that diabetes is going to go. And that's why you find that a lot of people now go through programs where they do bypass surgeries. You go in and bypass your stomach or reduce the size of the stomach. And the consequence of that is that you lose weight drastically. And once that happens, you'll be shocked. The diabetes actually disappears because the insulin resistance, which is what is at play in someone who has type 2 diabetes, disappears. And once that goes, you now have sufficient enough insulin to ensure control. So the answer to that is yes, more so when you have the pre-diabetes. If you lose weight, you eat right, you exercise as often as you should, it's quite possible that you reverse things at that point. And I tell people that, even with the kidney complications of diabetes, if you catch the patient early enough, before he develops overt protein in the urine, at the stage of what we call microalbuminuria, where there's slightly more than the normal, but not enough for us to detect by the usual means. If you control the sugar at that stage very strictly, you can actually reverse that kidney complication. But once the individual has developed protein in the urine permanently, there's no going back. So the only stage at which there is the potential for reversal is the stage at which you still have very small amount of protein in the urine. And that's as a complication. But in terms of the diabetes itself, if you lose weight, you come from a BMI of 40, and you manage to bring yourself to even just the overweight, 26, 27, 28 kilograms per meter squared, it's quite likely that that diabetes will disappear. More so if it's in the early stages of the illness.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, so there are still questions, and this one is saying, I noticed that when I eat carbs or anything sweet, I have flatulence. Like I'm intolerant to it and I'm gluten intolerant. I think he's just
if he takes vegetables, he says.
He said if it eats carbs.
Oh, carbohydrates.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's why it's appropriate for all diabetics to have a session with their dietitian at least once every 6 months. I'll even extend it to that. I'm sure they are trained, dietitians and nutritionists to let you have various options that would ensure that you do not have the unpleasant complications of flatulence. I know that's more common with beans. And there's a tendency for most diabetics to say, okay, what I'm going to eat is beans, beans, beans. If you eat a lot of beans, that tends to give you a lot of flatulence. You take a lot of milk as well. Most of us are lactose intolerant. And one of the ways that that manifests also with flatulence. But see your dietitian because there's so many options that are available that you can try. And they are trained to look at local options for those rather than what you can read online, which invariably is something that is not suited for our own environment. That they're not meal options that we commonly have available to us here.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, sir. Okay, so the next question is coming from Ogechi, and she says, how does the long-acting insulin work in the body? He says, I currently take Humalog, short-acting, and Lantus, long-acting. So if I check my blood sugar levels 2 hours after main meal, and it's above 140, do I take a few units of insulin to bring the level down? So let me take the question again.
No, it's okay, I heard.
Okay.
Lantus, like you said, is a baseline insulin. And it's usually advised that you take it at night. And what it does is that it just gives you a baseline continuous supply of insulin that ensures that you do not then develop the complications of absence of insulin like ketoacidosis. But then that baseline will not take care of the spikes that you get when you eat. And the ideal thing is that you should, with every meal, then take a dose of insulin corresponding to the quantity of foods that you're and the type of food that you're eating at that time. But that's going to be a whole lot of too many injections because it would mean that you're injecting yourself 4 times a day. And that's why very often we give you the 70-30 formulations of insulin, which enable us to give just the insulin twice a day. We give you 2/3 of the dose in the morning, 1/3 in the evening. And then you then still take the Lantus, which is the baseline insulin. So the Lantus is a baseline. Once you've taken it, you've taken it. If you then have spikes, you then take the slightly shorter acting formulations of insulin. And in acute illnesses, is that really short acting? And if it's short acting, ideally you should take that 3 times a day. Some people do. And that probably is the best that you should be doing, in terms of enforcing control. But for those of us who don't like the needle, then it's probably best that you take the slightly longer acting, which is the 70-30 formulations, in which case you can take 2/3 of the dose in the morning and 1/3 in the evening. And then if despite it, you then still have spikes, then you can then decide to increase one or the other of the doses. It takes a while, but I've met many, many individuals who've become very adept at managing their diabetes. And that's the way that you can ensure that you don't become part of the statistics of 80% of people with diabetes developing some kind of cardiovascular ailment or the other. Because we know that the better controlled that you are, the less the likelihood that you will develop some of these complications.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Babo Alu, I can see your hands up, but just give me some minutes. Let me continue. Let me finish up with the ones on the chat. Okay, so this is from Taiwan. It says, how much is the glucose monitor and where can I get it? And then this is also from Amaka Awanye. It says, can a keto diet be used to manage diabetes without medication?
The answer to that is no. And I'm usually very careful with these fad diets. Like I said, see your dietitian or nutritionist, let them advise you. Many of these keto, Mediterranean, all forms of diets, they are geared towards people who do not have already underlying conditions. And when it comes to managing diabetes, I think your diet needs to be a bit more specific. And I always insist that you see a dietitian who should advise you. I think the earlier question was as regards what? Remind me.
I think the earlier one was asking where we can get, how much is the glucose monitor and where can I get it?
Okay, like I said, this was brought from outside the country, but I'm certain if you approach any of the major pharmaceutical community pharmacies, even if they don't have it, they will ensure that they purchase it for you. But like I said, the consumable in it, you have to change every 2 weeks. And if I recall the last time I checked, each of those was cost as much as, I'm not sure if it's about 30 or 40,000 naira. So it's a very expensive device. But what I know about these things is that somebody starts it off, very soon you have generic forms, and the price will naturally come down. But for those who can afford it, ask from one of the pharmaceutical firms, all the chemists, all the community pharmacies. I'm certain one of them should be able to procure it for you.
Okay. Okay, so before I continue reading the chat, so maybe I'll just take on Babo Allow. Can you please unmute your microphone and then ask your question?
I think he might have written his question in the chat.
Okay, because I know I read something and this hand is just coming up afterwards.
Yes. Okay. Hello. I'm Babo Allow.
Okay, please.
Yeah. So good afternoon, sir. Oh, good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am.
Morning.
I was the one that asked about the carbs. I'm not diabetic, but I just noticed that whenever I eat anything carbohydrate, that is the reaction I have. Okay. So I'm just wondering what could be the cause, or is it a sign towards that, or there's something I can do to help out? Because things, even fruits like banana, or I take sweet potato, rice, anything carb or anything sweet, I have flat.
I think that might have something to do with your own bowel and your capacity to digest. A lot of us may have some kind of poor digestion. I don't want to call it indigestion per se. Mm-hmm. That might be peculiar to you. I mean, there's certain things I can't eat, even though I like. I love beans, but I can't eat beans. It gives me a lot of flatulence. And if ever
same here,
I eat it a little with a lot of rice to cover it. I love milk, but I can't take milk because I'm lactose intolerant. If I take milk,
same here.
So everyone should identify what the peculiarities of his own bowel is and walk around it. So I wouldn't go and take, on the day I take beans, I won't go and now take ogi and milk. I'll be in trouble that day. So just walk around your diet, and if you're not certain, what I would say is maybe see a dietitian or a nutritionist, and usually they are better informed when it comes to this.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
So before I take TechnoSpark again, let me just go through the chat as well. So we have this one that says, how healthy is gastric bypass? And
very helpful. I have had quite a few patients that have done it. They've lost considerable weight. And after the weight loss, some of them who are diabetic, the diabetes has disappeared. Now, the problem with that is that very often, after a while, what is now your new stomach starts to expand again. So it helps you to lose the weight, but if you're not careful, with time, you will end up regaining that weight after a few years. So, and that's why usually what I recommend, except in the extreme, is that you just need to be disciplined. Make up your mind, this is something you want to do. And then work at it. Try to lose at least 1 or 2 kilos every week. If you do that, you can lose up to 5 kilos a month. And gradually over 1 year, you can lose as much as 60, 70, 80 kilos if you're adept at it. That way, if you do it that way gradually, the likelihood that you will then reverse that in the future is much less. But the thing is, put into consideration what are the risks of my being as heavy as I am. It increases your risk of just about everything. We've just come through a COVID epidemic. Everyone who was overweight was at 20 times the risk of those who are not. We are more likely to suffer the complications, to have the more severe forms. You're more likely to be diabetic. You're more likely to be hypertensive. You're more likely to have a stroke. You're more likely to have a heart attack. So everything about weight is not positive. So I know my patients say that I go on and on about it, but I do, and no apologies for that. I see the complications when it happens. And I know that these are complications that we could have prevented if we had done something simple as weight loss. But I think what is even more important now is those who are middle-aged, elderly, already have that weight. What is even more concerning now is that the prevalence of obesity in childhood is increasing. We don't have statistics for Nigeria, but I can tell you the statistics in the Western world. They're finding that the numbers have grown from 8% to almost 20%. 20% of their adolescents are now regarded as being overweight or obese. And these are the ones that are now developing diabetes at that early age. They're the ones that are developing the non-insulin dependent diabetes of the young, the type 2 type of diabetes in adolescents. So we need to be careful. I mean, all this feeding our children early with artificial feeds, not encouraging them to be as physically active as they should be. You know, all of this is not helping. And we're not introducing the right meals to them. We're encouraging them to go and eat fast food. The idea of a treat for a child is to take him out to an eatery where he eats ice cream and cake and biscuits, all the things that aren't right.
Is the diabetic program.
So we really need to focus on children at that age. I told you about the 12-year-old that had never seen a carrot. What is this? For the first time at 12, was seeing a carrot for the first time. But these are things that we can introduce as snacks rather than biscuits and cakes and ice cream. We all need to focus on children at that age because the prevalence of diabetes is slowly increasing. Like I said, in Nigeria, it was just 2.2% in 1977. It's now 10%. In fact, in Lagos, I'll be shocked if it's not closer to 20%. So if it's rising that rapidly, it's not surprising that we're seeing a lot more people with kidney failure, a lot more people with eye complications, a lot more people with strokes associated with diabetes, a lot more people requiring amputation because of diabetes, a lot more people developing rashes, boils, you know, a lot more people with the neuropathies that can't feel their feet properly. So the more that we do to ensure that we control weight, the less the likelihood that these complications will happen. So let's focus on it, and more so in children. Otherwise, what we'll be seeing 20, 30 years from now would be a fraction of what we're seeing now.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so maybe at this point, before I take this other one, Technical Spark, do you want to also ask again? Okay, so maybe I should just take the chat then. Says, doctor, please, where can I get the arm monitoring sugar machine? And please, at what cost? So to get the ones, okay, to get one's mind prepared. And then he also says, is it advisable to mix 70-30 together with Lantus in order to prevent multiple injection?
Yes, you can mix the 70-30 with the Lantus. So the Lantus, like I said, is the baseline, which I think is recommended you take at night. Then the 70-30, you take it in the morning with your breakfast and with your dinner. So you take 2/3 in the morning, 1/3 before your dinner, and then just before you sleep at night, you take the baseline investigation. So that limits you to just 3 injections. The Freestyle Libre, I think, is, like I said, I don't know for certain. It's an Abbott product, and I'm sure Abbott is represented here in Nigeria. But speak with any of the pharmaceutical, community pharmaceutical chains, your Health Plus, your Health, whatever it is that you have access to. Speak with them, and sure, even if they don't have it, if enough people make inquiries, they can get it for you. The only thing is that it's, like I said, quite pricey. And my hope is that gradually generic forms will soon become available that hopefully will be as accurate as the originator program and the originator product.
Okay, sorry, I was trying to read through this question before I read it out. And anyways, I don't know if it's the question for this moment, but I think I'll just go ahead and read it. And I think that's clearly coming from Technical Spark. It says, I used to weigh 120 kilogram. I now weigh 114 kilogram. Intermittent fasting helped. I have lost 2 pregnancies and I'm willing to try for another baby when I get to my desired weight. I'll discuss this with my endocrinologist. Okay, about the glucose monitor, please, we can get a referral on where to purchase in Abuja. Like, person is trying to get a referral on where to purchase this in Abuja.
Well, first of all, to commend that individual who has lost from 180 to 115. And it just shows that it's possible. I tell my patients who, when I admonish them about their weights, they're telling me, oh, why are you going on and on about it? I say, well, because I see individuals who have developed the complications. It's not easy. I said, may God never allow you to see an illness that would force you to become, or to lose that weight. And you'll be surprised within 3-4 weeks how much weight you lose. And what I say is that sometimes the things we need to do are pretty simple. And I used to, take a lot of Coke. This is confession time. One time I just decided that, look, I'm not going to take Coke again. And in 2 weeks, I lost 5 kilos. So sometimes it can be as simple as that. You'll be surprised. You might say, Coke, isn't it just water? But water with a lot of sugar. And just stopping Coke alone was all it took. Sometimes it's avoiding snacking in between meals. And if you have to snack, take a carrot, take a cucumber, take lettuce, take something that the calorie content is not as much, but would fill your tummy. Exercise a lot more. All of us now have these smartwatches. And the smartwatches actually can count the number of steps that you take every day. I try to make sure I complete 10,000 steps every day. It's a lot, But like I said, sometimes what you need to do is for every hour, get up and walk around for 10 minutes. They say that sitting has become the new smoking. The complications of your sitting prolonged periods for long, apart from what we're discussing today, it's also not good for your back. And very often, also not for your neck. So you develop the tech neck, as they say. So get up and walk. And I have a colleague or one of my patients who says, look, he finds it difficult to find the time to exercise. So what he does is that when he's going home, I think he says he lives in Nikon Town. Once they get to the gates, the driver takes the car home, he gets down and walks to the house. So that's his own form of exercise. So by the time he gets to the house, he's exercised quite a bit. He goes and takes his shower and then sleeps. What I do, I mean, I generally tend to stay quite late in the office, but when I get home, regardless of how late it is, I go and eat my meal and I go out and complete my 10,000 steps. Sometimes that takes me an hour of walking. And I find that that helps, because by that time, it even helps with digesting my food that I'm tending to eat so late, which helps with some other problem I have, which is reflux. So you find that there are things that you can do even within the limits of what your occupation, your life in Lagos. All of us are spending 2-3 hours in traffic going to and fro. It's a challenge. So it recognizes all this, but you can walk around it and find a way to ensure that some people will say, look, okay, there's a gym close to my office. Rather than go and spend 2-3 hours in traffic, I'll go to the gym quickly. Let me exercise a bit. And then when I finish my exercise, hopefully something has improved, and then I can then think of going home. So there are things that you can do. At work, use the lift, and then use the stairs, don't use the lift. So if you have the opportunity, and I try to do that as well, because I realize that whatever I've done in the office reduces the amount I have to do when I get home later in the night. Rather than go and sit in front of the television, maybe get a treadmill. If you normally want to listen to the news for 1 hour, be on the treadmill and be listening to the news. Okay, if you have to go to the kitchen to cook, rather than sit and be telling the housemaid, oh yeah, bring that, get up and do it yourself. And there's this joke of the father who needed to get the remote which was in front of him. And he calls his son from upstairs to come and get the remote. So the son says, the remote is just there, Daddy. So get up and get that remote yourself. And whilst you're watching television, walk around. You can even walk around the living room. There are ingenious ways of enforcing that you can get more exercise, even within the limits of what life in Lagos, fortunately imposes on us. So I think that's about it. We've almost been at it for 2 hours now. Any other questions that we haven't answered?
Yes, so we're looking to end the meeting by 12, and somehow we're almost done. Yes. All right. For questions that are linked to child diabetes and all, you can feel free to send a DM to our pediatrician, Dr. Yemi. He's also here. But we still have more questions. Yes, sir. So let me just take just a little more. It's not a lot. I also dropped in the group, if you want to join the diabetes support group, we have an online group where you can also ask your questions. We have doctors there who can also give answers to you while at it. And I'm going to now take this final question so that we can end.
No, I think we should go through all the questions that you have.
Okay. I think at the moment, we don't have as much. Just one more question. It says, okay, this is someone advising everyone. It says, Dr. David said, there's a good number of all types of glucometers. Please check your nearest pharmacy for them or information on them. So then we have Tony asking, is zero fizzy drink okay to drink. So I'm sure it's referring to those normal fizzy drink that says they have the zero type. So it's asking.
We should all develop a taste for water. Those fizzy drinks contain things that very often are replacement for sugar. And you might recall that there was a time when that was saccharin, and then shortly after, there was some concern about whether saccharin was carcinogenic or not. So you never know what all these artificial things will, the potential complications that they'll have on the long term. So what I usually advise is just get accustomed to taking your tea without sugar. Get accustomed to taking water or fresh juices rather than anything that is artificial, because you never can say what the long-term complications of the use of such things might be. What about the use of Splenda as sweetener? Ifeoma, you are actually muted, so we didn't hear what you said, but I've read the question saying, what about Splenda and other sweeteners? Like I said, what I would advise is probably try and get accustomed to doing without them. But if you must, yes, those are safer than using sugar. If you're finding it difficult to live without something that sweetens your tea or your coffee or your pap, or whatever it is that you're taking, yes, you can take the things that are sugar-free. But those sugar-free things contain other things that I'll be shocked if 10, 20 years from now, they don't come back and say, look, this thing is not as good as we might have thought it was.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. I just want to especially thank you. Most of the other messages here are about thanking you for the lecture, which I believe has been impactful. And then I also have this message coming directly to me from Dr. Yemi saying, rising obesity in children, that breastfeed your child, do not ask your child to finish their food, do not snack on biscuits, healthy diet, activities for the family. So, Dr. Yemi, since you're here, can you please just give us these hints and just add to this other lecture, as well? Just a little, so we have our conclusion. Please, if you have any other question, like I said, I've dropped the link in the chat, which I will do again right now. Just click and it will take you straight to WhatsApp, and you then get to join the link. Dr. Yemi, are you going to speak? Stand your other hand up.
Yes, I'm raising my hand. My boss and mentor for the presentation. It's always a delight listening to him talk about the things he's passionate about. He touched on something about our children, and I think this is the time we should all decide what kind of legacy we want to leave for our children. There's rising obesity, and in fact, I am working on behalf of the hospital on something, looking at the children we're seeing in one of our outreach centers. Up to 10% to 20% of these children are overweight and obese. In fact, after the COVID lockdown, we realized that many children that are of normal BMI,
you love breakfast, see on your body,
normal BMI have become overweight and obese after the COVID lockdown. So it's important that the key messages are the ones I have sent via that chat, which Ifeoma has read to us. We should all encourage our children, because many of the people that are participating in this may already have stopped having children. So we should encourage our grandchildren to be given exclusive breastfeeding. That's where we are likely to reduce the risk of obesity in them. Children should not be forced to finish their food if they have had enough and they say they don't want enough. We don't need to start chasing them all over the place that they must finish their food. the diet of the family should be for everybody. It should not be for daddy that has diabetes or mommy that has diabetes. The children should eat the same thing. We should not buy Grand Square bread and leave it on the table. It's only the day we want to eat bread that we should buy bread. These children will be snacking on this bread, and that eventually leads to obesity. We should count our calories, even for our children. Look at the pack. This sweet biscuit that is sold in traffic, what's the name? Pure Bliss. One pack of Pure Bliss is equal to 2 cups of rice. And somebody would say he has just taken Pure Bliss, he has not eaten. So those are little things we can actually do for our children to protect them. Ribena, I'm sorry, Ribena and all of those things are not good for our children. That is the fact. We should homemade fruit juice and what will I call it, smoothie, whole fruit, they are better than all of these things. And as I said, once again, let's leave a legacy of healthy life for our future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. So that's Dr. Yemi, the pediatrician at St. Nicholas Hospital. I think I'll just use this opportunity to say that pediatric clinic now runs every Saturday at our Maryland branch. So it means you can even get to see him today in our Maryland branch. Thank you very much for that, Dr. Yemi. Sir, Dr. Bangwe, we still have questions for you. And this is coming from Dr. David. Say, is coffee good for a diabetic patient or someone with rising blood sugar? Coffee.
Well, that's an interesting question. And like I said, you know, science just keeps changing and sometimes confusing even those of us that are supposedly experts. I'm sure he's making reference to some recent news that said coffee is good for the heart. What we used to say before was that coffee was not good for the heart because it's actually a cardiac stimulant. But I think that there was some study recently that looked at it and actually suggested that the outcomes in those who took coffee were good. But I always take such things with a pinch of salt. And what I advise is that anything you do it in moderation. So even if you have to take coffee, limit yourself to no more than a cup or max 2. If you must take it, try and take the one that is decaffeinated, okay? And that way, you're less likely to suffer the long-term complications of coffee. Of course, in terms of weight, I mean, coffee in itself is weight neutral, but you invariably might want to take it with milk. So if you take a lot of milk and sugar with it, all those will ensure that you gain significant amount of weight along with it. So you need to be careful. Anything that you do, just do it in moderation.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, so I have another question from Kayode, and it says, beyond getting our weight under control, what other advice would you give to help manage calorie intake, as it is usually quite difficult to know how much calories are in our local diets? Moderation, maybe.
Well, the thing is, what I always advise, I mean, my general advice before you see your dietitian or nutritionist is, first of all, limit yourself to 3 meals in a day. Ensure that you take your breakfast. Limit the size of your meals. You don't have to continue to eat until you are full. Try to eat slowly. If you eat fast, before the stomach gets full enough to send a signal to your brain that you are full, you would have overfilled yourself. But if you eat slowly, you'll find that you give time for the stomach to send that signal, which actually would ensure that you actually do not eat as much as you otherwise would have eaten. Also, you need to be careful with what you eat. Eat things that would fill you, that will not necessarily make you gain weight. Usually what we talk about is glycemic indices, the glycemic index of a meal. So there's some that the glycemic index is very high. We eat a lot of rice, but we do know that the basmati rice is probably the basmati and the ofada rice are better than your whole grain, imported rice.
Wow.
And then if you have to take that, take it in small quantity. Of all the swallows, you find probably the best, the one that has the least glycemic index. Glycemic index is if you eat it, how fast and how high would your blood sugar rise? This, I think, is the amala made out of unripe plantain. Then I think the black amala. Okay, the worst would be your eba and your pounded yam. So if you have a spectrum and you need to decide which, but even if you have to eat those, eat it in small quantity, eat it with a lot of vegetables. You eat a lot of efo. The efo will fill your tummy so that you're not feeling hungry. And then you just eat it with a little bit of whatever swallow that you are taking. Avoid all the fizzy drinks. Avoid the alcohol. If you need to take milk, make sure it's the skimmed milk, not the full cream milk. Avoid sugar and avoid anything that contains sugar. So if you need to take bread, all your agege bread, all the bread that is sold, all contain too much sugar. If you know these French long loaves, if you know where you can get them, they're usually made with minimal quantity of bread. And whole wheat are much better. So, and with time, if you're doing your glucometer yourself at home, it guides you. Because you'll find that when you eat the wrong thing, or you eat too much of what you normally would eat, your glucometer will immediately tell you, because your blood sugar will just spike up. You now get 200, 300, and whoa, I've overdone it. And that's why it's vital that everyone should have his or her own glucometer. And not just have it and keep it there as an idol that you'll be worshiping every day. No, you should use it. And at least at the early stage, try and do it every day, twice a day. Do it before your breakfast in the morning. Do it 2 hours after your major meal of the day, and keep a record. Yes, the glucometer itself maintains a record. But what I recommend is that you get a book and actually put it in that book. So you yourself will look at it and it will prompt you and tell you that, look, I'm not doing right. After you've done it for a while and you're getting consistently normal values, sometimes I would then allow you to limit the number of times you do that test to twice a week. You do it fasting and 2 hours after meal on one weekend day and one weekday, meaning that you do it Sunday, Thursday, Saturday, Wednesday. And on those 2 days that you do it twice. And then you do it at any other time if you feel uncomfortable, if you feel unwell, or you are not sure about a meal that you've done. But other than that, if you feel comfortable about it, then do it every day. And you have these self-pricking devices that reduce the pain and discomfort. There's one that I know of, the Soft Click. I'm not advertising for anybody, but I found that all my patients who use that find that it's practically painless. So if you get that, that would help encourage you to do the test a little more often. And for those who can afford it, get the continuous monitoring devices, which actually monitors you real time. All you do is attach it to your arm and you continue to check on a regular basis and send the signals to your phone.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, so I think at this point, we just have everybody thanking you for the lecture. And I would want to say thank you very much too. And we have this coming from Uzo. She's asking for the slides. Please, if you want the slides, send your request to marcoms@stnicholashospital.com. I'd also written it in the chat. Marcoms, MARCOMMS @ Saint, spelled in full, SAINT, Nicholas hospital.com. All right, so it's 12:03 now, and I'll say thank you to everyone who has listened, those who started from the beginning, those who joined us on YouTube, and every other person. I want to say thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Yemi. Thank you, Dr. Usman. Thank you, Dr. Bangwe. Thank you to the MD of St. Nicholas Hospital. Thank you to everyone, and even those who asked, and those who have other questions, and even our new members who just joined the Diabetes Support Group. I want to say thank you very much. This lecture has been enlightening, and at this point, I would say thank you for watching. Bye. Is there any other thing any other person wants to add?
Sorry, you didn't answer my question, no.
Oh, sorry, Mr. John. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Okay, your hands are still up. That's true. I'm sorry about that. So we have
a question.
The same thing with me. My own hand has been up also.
Sorry, I thought I had asked you that you had said something earlier. I'm sorry about that, please.
Okay,
so 2 more questions from John and
yeah, I actually put it on the chat room. It's not actually on diabetes. Because this is my first time of joining this, and I so much enjoy it. I'm a hypertensive patient, so I'm just asking, when are you doing this kind of lecture on hypertension?
Okay, I think we're going to surely look at it. We've taken note of what you just asked. We can always have the Diabetes Support Group and we focus on hypertension. So sure. I hope you join the group so that you're going to get information on when we're coming up with something like that.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, sir. Okay, so TechnoSpark, your hands are no longer up.
Yeah.
So, Mr. John. In the absence of any other question. Okay, so Mr. John, please.
Yeah, I'm trying to bring down my hand.
Okay, so as it stands, there might be no other questions for now, sir. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you, everyone, and I do hope you found the talk quite useful. And certainly look out for when next we'll have another session. Thank you, and have a good day, everybody.
All right, the meeting is over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. God bless you, St. Nicholas Group.
Thank you too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so very much. Can we still send more questions if we have?
Yes,
or how do we do that?
That's why it will be nice you join the support group, the one on WhatsApp, so that your questions can be there. We also have doctors on the platform there who can give you answers.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Do have a lovely day. The meeting is coming
Please,
to an end.
how can we join the group?
Okay, I actually dropped the link. So look at the chat. There's a chat part of this Zoom meeting. So there's a part where I'm going to drop it right now. It says for more answers.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, I'm doing that now.
Thank you.
So you can click the link right away, and it will take you straight to the WhatsApp group as a joint member.
That's good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you too. So I want to assume those of us who wants to click the link have clicked the link because the meeting is about coming to an end.